Everyone wants a good score, and that's why it's important to understand GRE percentiles. Ever since the change to the GRE format in late 2023, percentiles have also changed, and that's why I'm making this video here today. My name is Satija, and when I took the GRE, I scored 166 on the verbal, 166 on the quantitative, and 5.5 on the analytical writing assignment. And now, currently, I am a third year statistics PhD student at Cornell University. Your percentile indicates how well you did on the exam compared to other test takers, and schools will use this percentile to compare applicants to their programs. And what's covered in this video is number one, how percentiles work. Number two, we're going to talk about the new GRE percentiles. Thirdly, what score do you need and what's considered a high score? And fourthly, we'll talk about the importance of getting a high score or how much it actually weighs in the decision process. What is a GRE score percentile? Well, luckily it's nothing too complicated. Let's say that your GRE percentile is 60. That means that 60% of test takers had a score that was lower than yours for the GRE, whatever section of the GRE that is. And for example, if you had a percentile 80, then that means that 80% of test takers had a lower score than you on that section. And you can also think about it the other way. Like if your percentile is 80, then that means you are at the top 20% of test takers for that specific section. And percentiles can actually be pretty useful for understanding where you are in terms of your relation to other grad school applicants. ETS, the company that runs the GRE, publishes these percentiles every year, and so it's important to stay up to date with the latest numbers. Let's take a look at these 2024 ETS numbers. And so you'll see that the total number of test takers is over 1 million, and we have the means here. So the mean for verbal, so that means on average, people get for the verbal section 151 for their score. And then for quantitative, people on average get 156. And they also have the standard deviations here, meaning that there's some deviation from this, and the mean is at 151 and the other mean is at 156. And for the analytical writing section, the average score is a 3.49 with a standard deviation of 0.88. And what these deviations mean is that there seems to be a lot of variability. So some people do a lot better on the verbal reasoning, some people do a lot worse, but on average, these are the scores. So Magoosh has this really nicely compiled GRE percentiles chart for 2023 to 2024. And so how do we actually read this? Well, let's just look at the first line here. So for a score of 170, that means that you're in the top like 99th percentile. And for quantitative, you're in the top 94th percentile. But let's take a maybe more illustrative example like 160. So if you score 160, that means that you're in the 84th percentile of verbal, meaning that you scored better than 84% of other test takers. And also for quantitative, if you score 160, then that means it's kind of a maybe tougher crowd where you are scoring higher than 61% of other test takers. Now, how do we actually use these to determine whether or not you meet the expectations of your target programs? Like, for example, UC Davis's economics program, they published that the verbal 60th percentile or higher is what they need for English native speakers, or 30th for non-native English speakers. And for quantitative, for the UC Davis economics program, they require at least the 70th percentile in the GRE quantitative section. And what about like MIT Sloan School of Business for the class of 2025? Well, the verbal scores need to be, or they're usually from 65th to 97th percentile. So we're just taking the kind of like confidence interval. So this is just the middle 80%. So usually they see scores between 65 to 97 for the percentile. And for quantitative, they usually see scores from 52 to 87th percentile. Well, what score do you need? Well, you can actually find this nice reference chart in this Magoosh blog that shows the percentiles for top schools. And we can see from the first line, for example, that Columbia University has an average verbal range of 155 to 164, and an average quantitative range of 153 to 170. And let's see, so in the second line, they have Cornell there. So shout out to Cornell. That's where I go to school. The average verbal range is 157 to 164, with the average quantitative range also being from 153 to 170. And so you can reference this chart to see for the top schools, what are the average accepted range that they have for verbal and quantitative. So once you take a look at the average percentile for your target schools or target programs that you're applying to, you can use this cool Magoosh free calculator that helps you calculate the score that you need. So let's take a look at this interactive GRE percentile calculator. So I'll go over here and let's change, so we can drag and drop this. All right, let's see. So if you change the quantitative score to 152, the total score adjusts, which is really cool, and then the percentile adjusts down here as well. Let's say on the verbal you get 107, let's say 165. Yeah, it shows that the percentile is 95% and the total score is 317. So you can definitely use this to refer back and see what score you need to get into whatever program or to meet that average threshold for the program, for the target programs that you're applying to. So let's talk about some benchmark scores. This is what the 50, 60, 155 score looks like. So for the 50th percentile of verbal, you would need to score 152. And then for quantitative, the 49th percentile is 156, and the 52nd percentile is 157. And what about the 60th percentile? So if you want to score such that your score is above 60% of the other test takers for the GRE, on verbal you would need to score 154. And for quantitative, you need to score between 159 and 160, so either of those scores. And for 155, so other programs might want to see a benchmark score of 155 in either section. And the percentile will be different for verbal versus quantitative. Well, what about the analytical writing assessment? Well, for the writing section, you guys might already know, it's scored between 0 and 6 in half-point increments. And there's actually only 10 possible percentiles for the writing section. So if you are to score a 4.0, then that puts you at the 56th percentile. But if you score a 3.5, that actually puts you down at the 38th percentile. So I would certainly encourage you to really try to get your score above 4.0 so that you can be in the top half of applicants. And I actually recently made a video about the analytical writing section, so I'll leave this here if you want to click on it after. And different programs might actually emphasize different sections of the GRE based on their field. Like for example, I'm in statistics, and I think certainly that the quantitative portion of the GRE is weighted more heavily than the verbal section. And I would imagine that in social sciences, for example, you would see that the verbal section is upweighted compared to the quantitative. Here are two reference charts to see what your target verbal score and quantitative scores or essay scores might be for your intended graduate program. And we can see that there might be some sort of difference between, for example, these social sciences and this engineering track. So do you need a 320 plus GRE score? Well, a lot of people talk about 320 as being kind of a cutoff for a high score. But that means that you'd have to get around 160 on both of these sections. And on the verbal, that would correspond to a percentile of 84, so that you'd have to score in the 84th percentile. And for the quantitative, that means you'd have to score in the 61st percentile. And it really might be more important to check out what your scores or the average scores are for your target programs that you're trying to be accepted into. Like for example, 160 in the quantitative section may not be as competitive in some STEM programs. But while high scores are achievable, they're actually not really necessary exactly for every single applicant to every single program. So how can we use our GRE percentiles to set these goals? Well, the first thing to do is to identify your current percentile for your current tests. So if you've taken some practice exams or something, then you'll know, or you'll be able to now calculate what your percentile is for your current score. And then the next step, obviously, is to take a look at the target schools that you're applying to and see what are the average percentiles for those programs. And then thirdly, we're going to need to try to make up that difference. So identify where that gap might be. Maybe you have a larger gap in the verbal area. Maybe you have a larger gap in terms of the percentile for the quantitative section. So wherever that gap is, you'll want to focus more time and effort into there. So you're going to want to prioritize your study areas with good quality prep. And I know that Magoosh has a couple great ones, like for example, their vocab flashcard app, and they have a free GRE practice exam. And I remember that back when I was studying, I certainly used their resources. And I actually even created a video, so I would check this one out. So these are the exact resources that I would use if I was prepping for the GRE in 2025, 2026, and beyond with the new GRE format. So here's some final thoughts. And also before you guys go, if you do leave a comment down below, I promise that I will respond to you. And I guess my final thoughts are just that the best GRE score for you is the score that allows you to meet those thresholds or those targets or those averages for the programs that you are interested in getting accepted into. And I would reiterate that you don't need to be in the top 10 or top 20% to be a competitive candidate. And you might even try reaching out to program staff to see what or just to understand what their score goals are. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Satija Monagay. If you like this video, please make sure to like. If you would like to see more content like this, please make sure to subscribe and let me know down in the comment section below. I upload pretty frequently, and I would certainly be open to hearing what you guys have to say in the comments down below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.